Hey guys, and welcome to Permissionless Learning. Last time we talked about space technology, and the time before that we talked about AR and VR. So, in space technology, we talked about how existing companies in India, what existing companies in India are doing about space technology, and what the scenario for space tech globally is. And this time, we are going to talk about Akshay and his journey from like with being an intern to a CPO, that is a chief product officer, in 4 years, and what all he has learned throughout his journey. So he's yeah, so he's currently the chief product officer at FabHeads, which is a startup which is trying to automate carbon fiber manufacturing from India. So it's actually more interesting than what I let on. So I guess I'll let him get started. But just before I get started, for those who don't know, permissionless learning is basically about learning new things or building new products before, I mean, without waiting for permission for anyone. So basically, you start learning any topic that you want. For example, the topics that we talked about, like AR, VR, or space tech, without waiting for permission from a university to let you do so. Or, starting to build your own product, which can be any side project or anything like that, without waiting for permission from your employer. So be sure to follow us on permissionless learning so that whenever we hold these talks, you get notifications, or you could just follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn for that, I guess, or any of the speakers here, to be honest. So yeah, I think I've talked too much. Now I'll let Akshay take the lead. And Akshay, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, hi guys. Good morning, and thanks Akash for your introduction. And this is something really good you are doing. Can really grow into a big platform. So just to give a short introduction, I am a chief product officer at FabHeads right now. I did my graduation from Berlin Institute of Technology, Mesra, in mechanical engineering. So right now, mm, the main thing because Akash called me is like to just share some ideas about how designing works and what is the normal process of how design works in everyday life and how it really affects people. So just to start with the journey, what I had. So in my college days, I was a part of a team called Firebolt Racing, which is an off-road, which makes off-road vehicles for various college level competitions. So that's where I got my hands dirty with designing stuff and testing it out and taking it to the real world. And after that, I joined FabHeads as an intern where I got more of an industrial experience in making new things which are really required for the industry and for the society. So and over time for the last 4 years I have been working there, and I grew up in the ranks a little bit. So I started as a normal design engineer, and then I grew up to the head of engineering, and now I'm the
काय झालं?
chief product officer and managing the team over there. So yeah, so
Hello. Yeah, Akshay, please continue.
yeah, so talking about design, I would say it. I mean, design has two things, right? So one is design for aesthetics, which most people would think of. Design would be like people who sketch things and give out the aesthetic design. And other part of design is where you actually design for a functionality. So basically you're given a set of specification and you design your system to be able to meet those specifications. So if you see how things are progressing these days, most of the things are able to meet this and the most of this design is getting more towards how the aesthetics are. So minimalism is one of the things that is growing up, and KISS is a concept, KISS, which most of you would have heard of, which is keep it simple. So it is get the best thing possible through the least number of systems working together. Like if you would have seen in the earlier days of uh, So things are moving from an IC engine to an electric car. In an electric vehicle, there are much less systems. You get more space for keeping your things, and because it is a much simpler system, and that is the way we are progressing towards keeping getting more simpler systems into play. And if even if there are many complicated systems, you want to like decouple them from each other so that if one fails, you don't want the other to fail. So yeah, that is where
Right.
we are going towards.
Akshay, you talked about a lot of things there. I mean, I understand there are you deal with everything, like a lot of things in your day to day. That's why you have a lot of things
Yeah,
to talk about in general. But to break them down one by one, I caught a few of them and I noted them down. So
sure.
if we could talk about each of them individually, and maybe where people
Yeah,
could,
yeah,
people find it interesting, they have more questions to ask you. So I think the initial part which people will find when they look you up is like they'll see your journey. So could you talk a bit more about that? You talked about Firebolt Racing. You
yeah.
had a part there. So maybe how your journey progressed, so that any new learners who might want to get into any kind of design could like also learn from that.
Yeah, so from the beginning, I was quite interested in like physical things, so like how things work. And in college, when I to actually do in college, there are so many people, so many clubs around, so many teams and everything. So it is a little overwhelming, but I found my spot in Firebolt Racing. So it is a small team, so it's around 30 people, 30 people in the team, and divided between different years. So you have like 10 people from second year, 10 people from third year, and 10 people from fourth year. So in the beginning, in the second year, you get to do more of a hands-on kind of activities where the design is already there. Someone has given you the design, and you kind of just execute it in a way, and basically like actually cutting metal, drilling everything. So that's where you get your hands-on experience. And then as you progress, so it's a simple yearly progress system. So even if you don't deserve it in the third year, you become a manager. So you then start designing things on your own as a third year because you're a senior. And the whole design of your car like depends on like how you actually make compromises in the systems, so how you deal with time pressure, how you deal with the economic pressure, like how much finance do you have in your team. So you need to keep all that in mind because all the funding is mostly, I mean, a little bit comes from the college, but most of it comes through some sponsorships, and it's a very small amount which you have in hand at a time. So you need to make the most economical system as possible, and that's where you get to learn how to make compromises in your design. You could always
Okay,
go for the most hi-fi systems, but you need to deal with financial aspects as well. Then so there we made a vehicle where we improved our suspensions a lot. We decreased our weight from like 300 kgs to around 170 kgs in that year. In the fourth year, we are more like we just keep an eye on the team, more of the administrative aspects, and see if everything is uh, whether it's a very good oil system. And yeah, so we manage mostly in the fourth year. So in my third year is when I got a internship in FabHeads, mostly because of my work in the the team, because these days the industries really look for people who have got hands-on experience and worked on real projects rather than just
right.
some college
So
projects. Yeah,
so I would say like there are GitHub profiles for software engineers, or design portfolios for UX UI developers. You
yeah.
This was your portfolio basically while you were.
This was my portfolio. Yeah. So one of the things in my resume was I used to provide a link to the video of a car being in a competition where you see the car doing like very weird things like dropping off a 6 feet cliff, and like going over logs and everything.
Yeah.
And that shows
So
that this is not something that anyone can just make and it works. You need to really put the effort into it, and being an engineer in that team, like it validates you sort of for what the industry really requires.
right, right. I've seen that your team actually does a lot of good PR. Like if any of you Google Firebolt Racing right now, you'll see a lot of videos and articles on these guys' team.
Yeah.
and
Trust
this
me,
was
we
in
were not as good as the people are right now. We didn't do that much PR in our time, but yeah, it has improved.
okay, yeah. So one of the aspects of design you say is that it's, I mean, at least in hardware design, because I think in software design there aren't as many constraints, but I might be wrong. Abhijit would talk about that later, I guess. But sorry, Abhijit, I'll give you a chance to speak. Just wanted to
Yeah, no, for
finish.
sure, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying like, so in hardware design, Akshay, you would say there's a lot of compromises in based on time and money. So could you talk about, I mean, so is the
Yeah.
case the same with even the current company
I
you're
mean,
working at?
yeah, and as many as there are differences between hardware and software, I would say there are similarities as well. So in case of software, time is money, right? So the more the more you want to put into the system, the more time it's going to take, and that is going to cost you. So
Yeah, true, true.
so yeah, there are differences, but there are similarities also. But yeah, as being a part of a hardware team, definitely money is something that plays a very key role. So like for examples, let's say I'll just start with an example of a car itself. Like in a car, being a team, we look at teams which are abroad. So that is because India is not yet to a point in the kind of vehicles we make to the people who are abroad in US, because they have had this competition going on for a very long time. So we draw inspirations from them, and what we find is they use such systems. Like they would use a suspension which is like which costs like 1 lakh rupees for one suspension. You need to put four of those. That's itself like 4 lakh rupees, and the budget of our whole car is around 7 to 8 lakh rupees. So how do we find that money? So we need to make compromises where, even though we see like those teams are using these things, we need to settle for something else but still make it work the best for us. So in hardware, that is really a case where the design actually plays a role in how much the cost of the whole car is going to be. So you need to be very frugal about what you're using, and some things need can be made in house, so they don't need to be outsourced to other people. So when you there are some things when you outsource actually end up being more costly. So we tend to make those things ourselves. For example, most of the suspensions actually we used to make ourselves, design ourselves, and we used to even manufacture most of the parts ourselves in our college using our workshop machines and everything. That saved a lot of money for us in that case.
Okay,
And we're doing a similar thing even in our company. So there are many systems which if you buy would cost you around a crore rupees, and we are making them for like 10 lakh rupees, because we are doing it on our own, and we are able to actually tune that system for our machines, and instead of relying on these other companies to give an off-shelf thing and then tuning our machine to just work with those parts, and even though we are paying a premium on top of that.
right, right.
So
And I guess the limitation with hardware startups is that even if you get millions of dollars in investment, that's still just a few
yeah,
crore
it
rupees.
it just goes away. It
Yeah,
goes away in a year. Yeah. Yeah, because you I mean, manpower is also one thing which you need a high manpower in a hardware startup, because I mean, a person can only do so much in hardware design, because there are so many. I mean, I would be speaking for software as well. Like there's so many systems that come together that but very few people, if you give it in just one person hand, I don't think one person can handle so many systems together. So you need to decouple them and give it to different people. So manpower also is more. You need more designers to be able to make something that is really like a complex system. So
right,
you pay to them as well. You need to pay the what is the market value to those people. So your money goes there. Plus you need to buy the best hardware, testing hardware, and everything. Yeah. So definitely finance is a crunch.
right, right. Abhijit, I guess now you could talk about the software side of things, I guess, like the UI UX side of things
Mm,
a bit.
right. No, so I think Akshay touched on a lot of very interesting points there. The manufacturing, just the design aspect. Since higher tech testing equipment and more people, there's always the question of scaling, right? So where I work, we are sort of perpetually understaffed, and that's mostly because it's a medium-sized software service-based company. So there are a lot of people moving in and out of the company at any one point of time. The employees, basically. So yeah, in that kind of a scenario, then if you're again, as Akshay said, time is money, and the shorter, the more you can turn, like the lesser the better it is for everyone involved. The client wins, you win. You can move on to another project. The client's happy, or something faster. So in that kind of situation, scalability is like a big issue because you can bring new people on and they can be talented, they can have a lot of experience, on their side. But at the end of the day, if you are as a designer specifically, at least from right from school, we are sort of told to empathize and truly understand the need of the user before going in and making any kind of solution, right? So that understanding takes time, and that is something that doesn't scale linearly with people. So the more people you add, if anything, the time to onboard them and get them to deliver any meaningful impact increases because all of them now have to get on the same sort of common level of understanding that you already have.
It's Mike.
That's a pretty big challenge in the software side of things, is what I'd say.
Okay, okay. And
Yeah.
apart from time, what are the other constraints that generally occur during like UI UX?
Yeah. So, um, again, I wouldn't say there are lesser constraints. It comes with the domain, in manufacturing, and again, this is something I don't have experience in. I'm just making assumptions, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, actually. But in manufacturing, the constraints are more material in nature. The sort of physical limitations of carbon fiber or steel
Yeah,
or aluminum and things like that. In software, the constraints are a lot more, let's say, technical in nature. So again, this is something Akash will also, I'm pretty sure, relate to. But there are, for any platform or any framework you choose, there are some things that they cannot cater to from a design point of view. So you can make a very, and that's something you also touched on. You can make a very fancy looking solution, and it can be very nice aesthetically. But at the end of the day, so for example, the product I'm currently working on uses the Ionic framework on the front end, getting a bit tech, bit specific here. But over there, for example, we are sort of stuck with the UI elements that are already there, uh, and then introducing your own custom made elements has that time penalty. So if you're then building something custom inside of, apart from what the framework already offers, then that's going to take a lot more time on the development side. On the design side, it's simple. You push some pixels, you make a fancy box, and you're done. But that's not where the story ends. And I think when it comes to design in general, at least uh, in my sort of college and where I studied, a lot of us, me included, I'm guilty, me included, we sort of glossed over the fact that you can make something look good, but then the implementation is where you truly have to understand whether the developer, if it's going to take him a lot of time to do it, if it's easy for him to do it, what are the methods, and over there, it obviously comes in handy, if not to code yourself, at least to understand the process. So yeah, that's definitely another constraint.
Right. I
And it's good to
definitely, I
keep in
think a
mind.
lot of software developers within us would empathize with that, like
Yeah,
having given a very extremely complex design with insane transitions and having a short deadline to code it.
yep. Yeah, I
Yeah.
bet I bet like a lot of you guys are like, finally, someone said it. All of you guys are just making crazy stuff, and then you're making us do all this work. But it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So
And yeah. So Akshay, another question for you, I guess. So, sorry, before that, Abhijit, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about in regards to design? Like any points
well,
you had in mind?
yeah, I did have some points, but personally, I want to sort of, maybe hear some more from Akshay
Hmm.
before we sort of get into a more free-form conversation around it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, let's maybe do that,
Yeah,
if
yeah,
that's good.
yep. So Akshay, could you, I mean, a lot more people would be interested in how being an intern is different, or how being a regular employee is being different from being a chief product officer or a CXO type person, I guess. So could you talk about your work or your responsibilities as a CPO, so that maybe people even get some of the perspective from that side?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So so coming from both sides actually, so I have been an intern and an employee. So I mean, in a very small startup, actually, it isn't that big a difference until you become very big. But still, as we are becoming big, I can see that there's a big difference because in a small startup, and if you are the only employee, you are basically the CPO. You can consider yourself as a CPO even if you're just an employee. If you have like only just another 8-10 people working with you,
Yeah.
because it's like if you see the traditional way of saying it, an employee is someone who just like takes care of his tasks and gets those things done, and maybe he's managing a very small team and
एक और
looking
phone.
into their tasks as well and just managing the time with them their time. But when you get to something like a chief product officer or something, you more than just thinking about the tasks that are there, you're more into like the strategy sort of thing, like what are we going to what are the strategies we are going to keep in place for the as a chief product officer. It would be what would be the products we want to like roll out in the future, and what are the uh, features that we want to develop in the current product. So it's more of thinking about the future rather than what's happening right now. So I don't like, as a chief product officer, I should not, but we as a small team, again, I have to but not get into the nitty gritties of what's happening in the company currently, but think about what's going to happen, let's say in a year or something, and make plans for those, so when people are done with the current task, they have a next thing to do towards that vision. So you have to change your way of thinking from more than present to something about the future as well. So for
Right,
example, we have 3D printers, so which can print with composite materials. So we need to think. I need to think about how the trend of the industry is going. What are the new machines that we should come up with? What are the new features we have to add? So we stay relevant. Like let's say even 2 years down the line. So because these days everything moves so fast. Like if I release a product today, there will be some Chinese guy looking at it and say, okay, yeah, this is good, and he will make it and just come up with his own product. So we have just like 6 or 8 months to like think about what's going to be next for us. You can't just stay doing the same thing more than a year in the current scenario where things are just happening very quickly. There are competitors popping up around you every time. So you need to think about what's going to be next year and again stay ahead of the curve all the time. So that's where, as a chief product officer, you come in, where you're not just thinking about the nitty gritties of what's happening right now, but thinking about how the industry is moving and think about the future.
right, right. So some of your responsibilities involve keeping your employees on block. Like they always have a vision of
Yeah,
what
that
they
is
want to do
part of
next.
the role. Yeah, that is truly part of the role, where it becomes more of a people thing where you need to keep your team motivated all the time and make sure that they know that they are doing something very relevant to the industry right now, and that they are adding value to as a whole, to not just the company but the whole industry as well. So that is a key role that is there to keep your team motivated and make sure that they know they're doing something good.
Right. And then, I mean, there's also the part of how hard you should work. I mean, you're, of course, working the hardest in your team because I know you put in 10, 12-hour days and you basically work all the time because you're such an integral part of the team. So, I mean, can you put more, what are your thoughts on the saying that, like, no one works harder than the boss? What do you think of that?
I mean, it's not true if you look at it. Like you need to define the word hard in that case. So, but still, like taking it as a very generic sentence, it really depends on how you're managing your team. So if you kind of just give, let's say, like how it normally works is, if you are a manager, you would give your team the task for the week, and once they're done with those tasks, they're done. So as a manager, if you want to push them hard, very hard, you can push them hard, but it's not something they want to do. It's just they would do it because you have pushed those things onto them. A better way would be to give them just the target, or just make sure that they do it on their own. So there are different strategies you can use for that. But people can work very hard. Like I don't know, like harder than the boss should be the thing, but they can work really hard given the right conditions. So it really depends on your work environment. So I have seen people who actually even work on Sundays just because they really want to get this thing done. They want to build that machine, get that machine built very quickly. So they even work on Sundays, and even work late nights just to get that thing done, even though they are not asked to do that, because they are motivated to do that. So it really depends on on a personal level. But yeah, people can work harder than there was. Yeah, that is not a wrong thing to say.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. I have a point here. If I can just jump in, but basically, there's these terms: extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation, right? And you touched on both. You said, like, as a manager, work hard by like putting in 12-hour work days for 4 days and then take the remaining 3 days off, or you can put in, say, a little less amount for all 7 days and take no days off. And everyone's work style is different, right? Some people, like you said, love to work over the weekends because they're motivated to finish whatever product it is they're building. But then there are other people who need breaks. There are people who need to tune out of work after a certain point of time, or otherwise it's tunnel vision, because then you're just in that thing 24/7 and you can't really look beyond it anymore. And that's where creativity gets stifled, and that's where design gets stifled. So yeah, for sure, I think, it's not about uh, like there's working hard, um, you know, today or over a day, and then there's working hard over a period of time in a sustainable fashion. And I would say the sustainable route is the one which will give better impact, which will take the company higher, and which will take in
Yeah,
turn the
right.
employee also a lot higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good points put forth by the both of you. So, before I guess we move on to more design related talk, I had one more non-design related question for you, Akshay, actually, and even you, Abhijit. So, Akshay, you also do software related work, but you do it outside, you do it as a side hustle, basically, and you do it after putting in your 12-hour work days, where I mean, basically, like Gary Vee suggests, I guess you stay awake at the night and try to finish the work relating to that side of your business. So could you talk a bit more about that, I guess?
Yeah, I mean it's just a side hustle. Like I'm doing, so it's nothing big as of now, but it's some product that I'm just working on called Bingeman. So you'll get to learn a little more about it in the coming days. Maybe we'll be starting a lot of marketing on that. So, but yeah, it does. I mean, as a just normal creativity wise or something, if you keep doing the same thing like over and over again, like FabHeads, even though it's truly great, I mean, you can't just spend all your time on that. You need some other motivation to like just like stop this and something, go to something else for a small time. So this is kind of like a release for that. So and I think everyone, if not a separate company itself, everyone should have some kind of a release mechanism to like just release their stress. So people go into music, some people go into sports, but that is something which is really important. But I felt like software is something that I wanted to try my hands on from a very long time. So this is something, so while learning itself, like I thought, I'm learning software, so why not make something out of it? So while learning, I just kind of put some things together and came up with this idea of an app for like a social platform with around movies and TV shows. So yeah, you'll get
Right.
to learn a bit more about it.
Yeah, and you're taking it quite seriously because you even have a few interns under you.
Yeah, so a couple of people, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, they just kind of just to make my life easier, sort of, so that I don't have to spend so much time on it. So I got a few interns to like work with me, and yeah, I treat them just like my employees I do at FabHeads, and really give them the freedom to even add new ideas to the app as well.
Ah, okay. Interesting. I mean, one thing about adding features in software is that someone has to also maintain it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, right now we are very small, so I'm not sure how far we'll go, but I am quite optimistic.
Yeah, Abhijit.
Yeah. No, no. So that was also something feature creep, right? So I'm not sure, how many people know this term, but basically you can perpetually keep adding more things to your products, but at the end of the day, at some point, the user will probably just question why it's there. And that, to some extent, that happens to every. I don't think there's any company that does it 100% right, but yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. You know, to stick to the core values of whatever the product it is that you design.
Yeah, like looking at it as a big company, you never any company wouldn't take a step back and think about like what features should I remove right now. They just keep
Hmm.
adding features and like it then clutters up, but no one really takes a step back and says what is relevant right now and removes things. That's what happened to Windows as well. They just kept adding, and then there's a lot
Yeah.
of legacy stuff still left behind, which is not even required these days. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's not
and it's
happening.
like
So
Akash said, right? Yeah, and then maintaining all of that is a nightmare.
correct.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. No one likes to touch old code because you don't know what will happen when you try to remove it.
True.
hmm. It's like some Indiana Jones stuff. It's like uncharted territory. You touch something, suddenly everything starts collapsing. You get thousands of bugs and errors.
Yeah.
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 So, Abhijit, would you like to talk about some of your side hustles, I guess? Like, I mean, design for you also started as a side hustle, I
Side
guess.
hustle.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, my journey has been all over the place. And yeah, I mean, I'll put it this way, design wasn't something I was planning to get into, uh, at least from school and all. And I think that's the case with like a lot of us, who have at least heard of design or who practice it or use it on a daily basis. It's maybe not something that you consciously sort of thought of way back in school or whatever, but then slowly as you learned more or you read more books and things like that, you became a lot more aware of how it's used in products and services. And then for me, sort of now going into software, I think I
Thank you.
won't go into the details of it, but I think some like things to take away is that uh, just generally in design, there's a lot of people point of view, right? Because design is sort of, I won't say it's young anymore, but it is a relatively newer field in terms of the professional definition. So a lot of people think about it as aesthetics. They think about it as oh yeah, product design. That means it's
तो मोठा
like
light
a
लाव ना.
slick looking car or something. The Pininfarinas or the Bugattis or the Lamborghinis of the world. But then it's a lot more than that, and that is also something I found out the more I went into it. So I started off wanting to learn animation and 3D in my first year, and then our college just did a 180 and they shoved paint and watercolor in our hands, and they're like, "Huh, now you use this and you make artwork, okay?" And I had never done any of that, so I was not good at a lot of it. But it's not about say maybe mastering the art. It's more about developing an awareness for it, and like I hated that first year because I wasn't good at any of those things. They made us do woodworking and they made us weld random wires together to make something meaningful. So I wasn't good at any of it, but it made me think, in terms of expanding my horizons, in terms of just knowing about these different things, or about product design, or about, say, photography, and all of those things in some way or the other sort of tie back to the whole 3D aspect of it, because CAD CAM is a huge thing for product design, and that is something that I had never looked at. I always used Blender. Like from school days, I started with Blender, open source 3D modeling, sculpting all in one. Details like proportions of various objects, sizes of models and things like that, which I did not pay attention to, but which are equally important. So those are things which I learned through those years, and definitely it's helped me out a lot. In terms of side hustles, at the moment, I'll be very blunt and honest. Work is pretty much 90% of my time, but the remaining 10% is basically just 3D, which I'm doing on Blender, sort of upskilling on that, learning all the other techniques, because it's a lot more than modeling. You have lighting, sculpting, rigging, and all of these are different fields in themselves. So just getting to know about those and applying that. Apart from that, just generally getting better at speaking, because I don't know if other people can relate, but I'm pretty introverted, so speaking does not come naturally to me. So yeah, that's just it's basically me in the learning stage right now, which sort of ties into, I guess, me being interested in this entire thing as well.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Yeah, I
Yeah,
remember during high school I used to learn coding and you used to learn design. And then I
yeah.
also tried to learn some design from you, which actually because of which I started with Unity and which
Oh, sweet.
helped me get more into programming, I guess.
Cool, cool. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
thing is, I don't think you thought of it in that way, right? You just sort of thought of it in a more specific way. Like, I just want to learn this for the fun of it, and then
yeah,
ultimately it ended up contributing to your career.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Akshay, you are unmuted. Do you want to say something?
No, no. So I was just saying, I mean, we should not look at design, the aesthetic part of it, as a very different part than the functional part itself, because in most cases they work together. So you take, like
absolutely.
it said about designing is just like some people think of it as making just a sleek looking car, but that sleek looking car is actually going to get you to like 200 kmph in 6 seconds because of the aerodynamics of it. So sometimes it really ties in really well together with the actual specifications of a car. So most we can believe that most things that look good actually work well. So that is something that is there. So it doesn't isn't just the aesthetic part of it, but if tied well together with even the functional part of it, actually that can deliver you the best design and the best product.
Actually, this
Yeah,
ties in. Sorry, Abhijit, but just a sec. So this
yeah.
ties in well with
Good.
something that I wanted to talk about. So I mean, I also wanted to talk more generally about what the future of design is. So since you talked about like people try to make a good form and then it also helps the functionality of it. So we can see that with chairs kind of where the fancier and more expensive chairs are also kind of more comfortable because they've actually tried to implement for ergonomicity of it, right? Like fitting the human form for the chair. Or even with any tools that we use, like there are these weird looking mice from Logitech and they're really, really expensive, but they're expensive for a reason because they're specifically built for the shape of the hand or to make it more comfortable. So like in my opinion, like one of the things that I mean, we will all be seeing more in the future is like these weird looking things which kind of look weird to us, but they might be expensive at the start but will enter more into mainstream throughout the line through like ergonomic design basically. So what do you guys think
Yeah,
of
no,
that?
I agree. I agree completely, man. I mean, there's a lot of debate out there where people say form over function or function over form. But I'd say the form comes from the function, right?
Yeah,
It's
correct.
not just that you're making it look cool, but it looks cool for ergonomic reasons, or like Akshay said, for aero or weight reduction, and all of those things are basically necessary, right? It's not something you're just slapping on top and saying, oh, this will make it sell better. It actually say fits. So for the Logitech mouse example, it fits your palm a lot better, and that's very important because at least for a lot of us, I presume we're sitting in front of our computers 8, 9 plus hours of a day, just using a mice all the time,
Right.
and with that comes the inherent risk of repetitive stress injury or RSI, and that all has to do with how your hand is sort of sitting on your mouse. So the mouse might look weird, but at the end of the day, if that reduces the pain in your wrist and if that sort of helps you basically interact with it a lot longer, then that's beneficial, right? And that is what will drive its sales. And then that goes back to the car example also, you know, like aero and weight reduction and all of those things. So you have, a lot of sort of car enthusiasts or car fanboys, if I can say that, sort of go into, slammed cars where you have basically no distance between the wheel well, and it's just a huge wheel. And in reality, those things may look cool for desktop wallpapers, but then if you're driving those around, then you're basically going to ruin your vehicle, right? But for race cars and things like that, being a lot closer to the ground helps with your center of gravity and weight distribution when you're going into turns and things. And but that is not the case for say off-roaders, where you would probably want a lot more travel because you're going over rocks or whatever, and you don't want everything just smacking the underside of your car and taking things out. So yeah, I feel like the function should define the form, and if you design for the function, then you're going to have something that looks unique, that doesn't look like everything else
Stop the
out there,
culture.
and that does the job really well. And that's what people want anyway, right?
Right, right. And do you have some thoughts about what your idea for the future of design would be? Like
Oh.
any design you can talk about, honestly. Like I see a lot of
Hmm.
work being done in 3D where, people are, I mean, taking the GitHub example again. So basically, people are able to write good code because there's already a lot of good open source code out there. Again, sorry, I'm
Right.
leading you towards an answer. I don't want to do that, but whatever whatever you
No,
want to
that's
say.
fine. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, 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 that's fine, that's fine. And yeah, no, I get it. But I think future of design, specifically when it comes to software, it is definitely going in a direction where, people development side of it, just aware of how, what kind of frameworks are available, what kind of languages are available, and what their capabilities are. And the other aspect to it is the whole what you see is what you get thing. So there's just a huge number of website builders out there, so that's a very specific use case where people want to build their own website. But earlier, you basically had to get into HTML, get into CSS, spend your time learning all of those, all learning the syntax. It's not hard, but you had to spend time learning it,
So
and then
you would
applying that
say
onto the website.
that design is going more towards that, I guess. Like, I mean, I think you're talking about software development in general more. Like, it would go
Hmm.
more towards, I guess, no-code tools as they are called nowadays.
Exactly. Yeah. I wouldn't say software development in general, because at the end of the day, everything can't be no code. You
Right.
need specialists who are working on new frameworks, and that is only going to evolve. But yeah, definitely for people who are getting into the industry, for them, the code requirement is greatly lessened. And yeah, as you said, those no code tools are definitely going to increase by a huge amount in the next couple of years, I'm sure.
Interesting. Yeah. Akshay, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this? Like,
So
the future
talking
of this?
about future of design, I think we're going to move more towards rather than one product doing many things uh, itself, to more like one product which is doing one thing very well. So you're going to see more of this micro products kind of thing, which are intended to just solve one problem. So earlier, like there used to be things like, let's
हाँ,
say
काम करते हैं
something like a, I mean, this products used to come where you have a
हाँ, काम
chiller or a cooler, which you used to have Bluetooth with that, with speakers, and then you have also charging ports, and there are many things it does, and that doesn't sell well these days. You people prefer to have one product that does one
कैसे
thing
बाबा
really well. Even with respect to software nowadays, you're getting this niche products which, like Clubhouse itself, is just doing one thing very well, and that's how it's going to progress. So people aren't going to spend that much effort on making one product which is going to solve like thousands of problems. They'll identify one problem
मी
and
तुला
make a
म्हणणार होता
product
प्लीज
around them,
फ्युचर ऑफ
and
डिझाईन बद्दल बोल
I think it's not going to get bloated in the future like it
त्याच्या
has
माहिती
been in the past, because people have
मग मी
seen
तुला
how
म्हणतो मग तू म्हण की आय हॅव अ
bloated
क्वेश्चन टू
things
आस्क तसा
like go down very badly, like Facebook. So they kept adding features, and now the current generation doesn't find Facebook that attractive anymore because it's too crowded. There are too many things. They would rather pick one app for like doing one of their things. So I think that's going to be the future. A single product for doing one particular job.
and
Yeah, I think Akshay, you brought up a very uh, good point there, specifically when you said generation, right? So I think
Yeah,
it's a very generational thing. Maybe the previous generation of software products or people wanted a more generalist approach where they're like, okay, I'm spending money on this one thing, so I
correct.
wanted to do everything. But our generation realizes that if that one product is trying to do everything, it's probably good at none of them,
Yeah,
and we want that specificity. That's why we choose Spotify over say YouTube Music, because we know Spotify is going to give us those higher quality controls. It has a much bigger catalog of music and things like that. So yeah, that's definitely an interesting aspect.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, also
And
Akshay,
speaking of design, also, I think it's more of a very generative thing. Like it has evolved over time. So, like what you might find
Yeah,
attractive today, people earlier wouldn't have found those things. For them, something that is good would be something different. So it has like evolved over time, and form has gone along with function. Like if you take controllers, you see the Nintendo 65 controllers
yeah,
and all, they were, but over time gaming has evolved to like even adults and everyone. So people who make controllers have to keep in mind both the kids who are going to play the game as well as adults, and they need to be able to fit both the demographics together. So that is what is dictating the design of like controllers these days. So it changes with how the generation change, or how the time changes, and the people's perception of things. So yeah.
100%.
very true. So Akshay, something you talked about previously with me, or I mean, which wasn't brought up today, but I just thought that it was quite an interesting point because you had some interesting thoughts on it, was how marketing and design would be more
Correct, correct.
collaborated
Yeah,
in the future. So if you could
yeah,
just,
yeah. So I mean, earlier were the days when you would like actually go to the shop and like test things out, right? Like if you want to buy something, you wouldn't just buy it online. You would like go there, you will
इथे
feel
पण आहे
it
तुझे
for a
तुकडे
few days, or you go to a competitors and
पायाचे तुकडे शेंगड्या
feel that, even let's say you're buying a laptop or a phone, you will actually like ask to give you a demo, and you'll feel it out and see whether it works best for you. But these days people are more into impulsive shopping, and on a click of a button you can get things. So
त्यात मजा येते ऍक्च्युली
design is going to move more towards getting the same,
त्याच्यात
like
म्हणजे मला
making the
बोलायला आणि
product for
ऐकायला मिळतं
marketing. I don't know if that makes sense, but
तुला नाही
like
येत मजा
if you see it, you would feel like you actually, how it would feel by holding it, like textures of the material that are on the thing. So when you see, like these days the keyboard decks are coming with this very velvety material, so when you see that, you'll actually feel like, yeah, this would feel very soft to my wrists or something. So even before you get that product in hand, you want to be able to show what it would feel like in your marketing material itself. So for that, you need to design such that it transfers well to that kind of virtual environment where, I mean like if you really make a good product, if you get it in your hands, you would like it and you would buy it. But that gap has become such a big gap these days where you're not really going to get that product in hand unless you buy it. I mean, most of the people don't have physical shops these days. Most companies, they just sell online. So how are you going to bridge that gap? That is through design and showing those features like in images or videos, and you need to design it such that that intent is transferred to the user and he can really feel it. So sounds is going to be one thing, then texture, material textures, yeah, things like those will be like more pronounced in the future designs.
Right, 100%. And uh, I mean, how would this affect? So, well, what you're talking about is mostly direct to consumer products because you can buy them online and then they are shipped to you. So, they are, I mean, there's a lot of focus going in the marketing side of things with the copy and everything, where, people like Apple does, like they put a lot of focus on privacy nowadays. I mean, you can't quantify privacy, right? You can't say that this product is more private than this product because of these factors. But you can give a more broader understanding of how, I mean, how it is more private. Like they manage your data by themselves, stuff like that, which is what attracts more affluent people towards it, I guess. And then
Especially
there's
with the freedom phone frenzy going on right now.
yeah, yeah. Can you talk a bit more about Freedom Phone for those who don't know about it?
So Freedom Phone, I think Eric Finman is the name of that guy. So he had turned a millionaire just by Bitcoin, and he recently released a phone called Freedom Phone, which like promises the most highest privacy, and so they don't feature any app store, Google App Store. They don't feature any of the social media apps also, I think, and they have their own app store which is unmoderated, and they think that would be the best thing for privacy by
Um,
just giving people malware. So yeah, and
yeah,
yes,
lots of malware.
yeah, so that, and they had this a big this influencer campaign where they're paying $50 for each referral someone is using. So yeah, it's a bit shady, but and the phone also is not made in US. They call it the American phone, but it's from China. So
All right.
Like a lot of things marketed to, those types of Americans,
yeah,
like MAGA hats, which also come from China. So yeah, no, that's a very interesting point actually, which you brought up. So there's two types of marketing, right? One is genuine marketing, and one is marketing with deceptive intent. And that's also in our future. That since things are moving online, things are a lot less tangible. You, like you said, you can't have the product in your hand until you've bought it, and that means that people basically have freedom to say whatever they like about the product, and then it's only after you buy it that you realize uh, how good or how bad the thing actually is. So that's a dark, that's maybe a less more negative side of it, but yeah, that's also something to watch out for.
yeah, and user behavior, like one more thing that's changing is today users don't have tolerance. Like if they see one thing bad, they will be like, okay, the whole product is bad. Let's shift to a different thing,
Mm,
and this doesn't work. People don't give time to companies these days to like fix their mistakes. So companies also have to focus more towards perfection, and that it has its own problems also. But like there are like two things playing against each other. One thing is like you need to be like on top of the whole all other companies and deliver your product the fastest. But if it has even one bug, there is just another guy waiting around the corner selling his product. So that is,
yeah, major challenge.
yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll just go about the rest of the people who we have with the speaker panel right now, and I mean, I want your thoughts about some of the things that we talked about. So, Pratik, are you there right now? Pratik Oswal.
Yeah, Akash, I am there.
Yeah. Hey, so do you want to talk about? I mean, we talked about a lot of things, I guess, on a broader level, like side hustles and
Hello,
what the future of design is. Hello, can you hear me?
hello, Akash. I think.
Are you? Can you try? I mean, I think you're not audible to me.
Oh, Akshay, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah, you're audible to me.
Is anyone facing issue? I'm not sure.
So I can hear both
Network
of you
is
guys.
problem is
I
from
mean,
my side.
Maybe
Just
can
give
you
me a
can
minute.
change your audio output device, maybe.
Then
Now it's audible. So sorry. Yeah, Akash, can you please repeat the question?
yes. So broadly, we talked about like side hustles and the future of
Right.
product design. So
Yeah.
any thoughts on any of those things or whatever people talked about?
Yeah. So actually, I liked most of the things that Abhijit and Akshay was talking about. And when Akshay or Abhijit, I think Akshay said that, it's the time, it's a now time when, people are focusing on a specific product than a bunch of the features all together at once. Like he given the example that Facebook is too much crowded and people want something specific to achieve their objectives. So I'm really agreeing with this and most of the other stuff that Abhijit, Akshay both were talking about. I have a question for Abhijit. uh, I mean, I think
yes.
Abhijit is do software design and also related to product management, if I'm not wrong. So if I want,
Yeah, you
huh,
can say that.
yeah. So if I'm building a kind of product for my company, so like from the point of from the document point of view, from the visualization, heat maps, road maps, milestones, this all sprints and Jira, what tools we use, how do we start exactly, what documents we use, and how do we collate everything, like how do we structure the kickstart for any product development idea.
I see. Yeah, no, that's a very good question. I think that's a very relevant question for a lot of software products out there today. My I'll I'll answer this maybe quickly in two parts. One is
Yeah.
what my company is sort of doing, which uh, spoiler alert, I do not agree with at all. Okay, and the other is what I would say is probably a better way to go about it. So my company, we have Jira for tracking management and just generally knowing all the issues, and it's a ticket system and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, the short answer is it is a little bit up to you because every tool for tracking, you have Monday.com for example, or you have Jira, or you can even do it on Notion. So it comes down to your comfort level where you pick up one of these tools, maybe mess around with them for a day or two. And if they seem intuitive to you and your team, obviously, then that is what you pick up.
8,000.
But then the thing is, so with my company, for example, our workflow is very chaotic. So that is partly to do with me coming to know and really starting using Jira
50 lakhs.
last year. So before that, I only knew Jira existed. I did not know how it worked, the ticketing system, tasks, subtasks, checklists, epics, roadmaps. It's a huge rabbit hole, and that's stuff I learned in the process of using the tool. But the thing is, if any one person in your team doesn't like using, for example, in my team, a lot of people they don't. I'm not sure if they don't like using it or if they just find it boring. But in either case, if they don't use it, then that sort of defeats the point because then the thing is, updates don't come in. Tasks sort of stay stagnant. They don't move forward. And then at the end of your sprint, you have no real clear picture of how things went down because most of your team members ended up discussing it on a Teams meet or on Google Chat, Google Meet, or whatever. So I'd say the first thing is to maybe just mess around with a lot of these tools and see what you and your team are comfortable with. And maybe like a dry run, maybe have like a very quick side project lasts maybe 2 or 3 days, where the intent of that would just be to discover and use as many features in that tool as possible. Because all of these so in Jira, for example, the task tracking, labels, and things like that, they're all done so that you can understand the process of an issue or a feature, how it came in, what the requirement was, how you decided to go about it, and what the final solution was. And if any one of these things are not used, then that makes the picture incomplete. So the other side to it is your team may be comfortable just doing the entire thing offline. Okay, so I don't know how it functions with you guys specifically, but there is a possibility where people just want to get on a quick Teams meeting, okay, discuss everything and sort of update people what they're doing for the day, and then that's it. They just don't want to deal with the management side of it ever again. So if that's the case, then there is a question of whether the tool would be helpful at all in that kind of a scenario. So it's really, I think the answer to that is, uh, Google some of the tools, just download their trials or, use the software online. And what if people are finding it comfortable and if it's making their life easier, then you can basically start that and stick with that. But I would say do not enforce any one particular tool on everyone, because then if they're not into it, then they just won't use it, and then that defeats the point of using the tool in the first place.
Right, right. Noted, noted.
नाही ना, नाही गेलं.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Abhijit. Understood.
yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for the question. Astik.
Yeah, yeah.
Pratik, anything else you want to talk about in regards to your side hustles or something like that? Or, even what you think the future of design is going towards, I guess.
Uh, I think I don't have much insights on this topic as of now. I just started. Uh, I'm just thinking of starting career with the product management and the product learning. So I think I'm just a listener right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Madhavi, are you there right now?
Yeah. So, I wanted to initiate this discussion actually. It's a very basic one. You guys wouldn't have to talk much on it, I guess. But I'm really curious to know like Akshay said, aesthetics is becoming a very important part in any product development or design. I guess people and you have competitors in every field, so everyone's trying to be unique, so aesthetics is becoming a very important part. My question is, how different is aesthetics when with respect to hardware design versus the software part? For example, like in hardware I can really touch the product, and uh, there are many factors that come into matter, like the temperature, the surrounding temperature that maybe will affect the overall performance uh, with respect to aesthetics, or it may be dust, uh, something like that. But for software, I think it does not make quite a difference if I see it from a different gadgets. So what are your uh, perspectives on it? Both of y'all can talk.
Yeah, I'll just start off with it. So one thing, so in a hardware product also, or I'll just start with the hardware thing. So aesthetics mainly what we specify in our like when you come to the specification, you would be giving it to someone who is just giving you the like how the overall product should look like, because it like fits in the market well. So let's say you're making something for a institute or a college, you don't want it very fancy looking or something. It should be just good enough rugged so that multiple people can use the same thing, and you want it to be rugged. But let's say you're making something for a household or a home, you want it to be very minimalistic so that it fits well with your decor. But that is just the looks. But there are other aspects to the product which may be functional, may not be functional, but those are like what kind of a feedback does it have. So let's say your product has buttons, so what kind of feedback do those buttons give? So even though those, if some buttons look very good, but when you press them and you don't get the kind of feedback you would expect from them, it is not a good product in that case. And also, if your product is getting too hot or too warm for that, even let's say it's an oven or something, you don't want the oven to like heat up the whole kitchen. I mean, then it's not a good oven. So even though those are not really function aspect but causing inconvenience to the end user, that would be a bad product. So yeah, aesthetics wise, it's both the aesthetic looks and the kind of feedback you get from that product, which plays a big role. And in case of software also, I think this is a big thing, because most of the software these days is going towards getting good feedback. So when you press something, you should get a good feedback saying, yeah, your action has been completed, instead of just like waiting and just
Right.
being unknown about what has happened on what action you have performed. So
Right.
it's more about the user feedback and the kind of interaction you have with the software. So I mean, they tie in well together. It's not just the hardware. So again, the feedback can be both visual, and lot of haptic feedback is also there these days. So yeah, it's not very different for hardware and software. It's again not just about the looks, but also more about the how the user psychology is, and where things are placed well so that they're more accessible. Like these days, the phones are becoming very big, so you don't want your most used buttons and all to be on top of your screen. They should be somewhere below so that they can be accessed with one hand. So it does depend on what kind of gadget you're using. So if it is something like a very small screen, you want to tune down the UI so that the buttons
सुनाई
are
चल रिप्लाई करा था
very
भाई
big. And again, when it's a very big
बोल ना
screen like an iPad or something, you want to be able to show more information because there is more space for it. Yeah, so it does depend on a lot of other aspects also. Yeah, yeah, Vijay, you can add more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 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 very valid points there, Akshay. And yeah, it's like you said, there's a lot of overlap software and I would think there's a lot of overlap between software and product design in that aspect where you basically want to address the pain points of your users, right? So if
Yeah,
you're making something, then for example, the oven, if it's heating up the entire room, or if the door's handle is too hot to touch, then people aren't going to like it. That will be a pain point. And then for software, the responsiveness of the product as a whole, and that is something that isn't aesthetic. That is something that's purely just it's a bit subjective also maybe. But if you're tapping a button, then you would expect feedback as to what's happening, and also you would expect a reasonable time frame for that action to be executed. So in a lot of cases where people have poor network or something, they'd keep refreshing the page or they'd keep tapping a button, and then that can cause a lot of issues. But then that is something you can very easily fix by, say, providing a timer or providing an error or a progress bar or a loader. Small things, they don't have to be over engineered, but basically those affordances and signifiers, to get a bit technical again, uh, which will help the user out and basically tell him that, all right, I tap this button, it's going to take 10 minutes for the action, or it's going to take 10 seconds for, say, my phone to communicate with the bank and then confirm that the money is gone to Swiggy or whoever. And without that, that makes your user very frustrated. And then to talk about the aesthetic aspect of it, uh, there's one point I'd like to say that that's something Akshay also said. It's a very dynamic world out there, right? So you're making a product today, someone will try and copy it tomorrow, and they might make it better looking, and then suddenly you are in a competition with them where now you're just trying to one up them in terms of making a beautiful looking product rather than focusing on the feature set. And that can work, but then that doesn't work for a very long while. And like a perfect example for that is OnePlus. OnePlus tried to be the premium Android brand, and now they're just all over the place, at least in my opinion, in terms of their product range, and it's no longer as premium as, and all the competitors have essentially caught up to them. So yeah, I guess at the end of the day, if you focus on those pain points and if you focus on the basic features that the users sort of really want to be seamless, then that's going to, you know, long term be the best sort of way to go about things.
तू बोल right
Yeah, I completely agree. One shouldn't go overboard with this aesthetics so much so that you compromise on the whole performance. Uh, Agree to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I guess we've gone over and over right now, but quickly, do you all want to talk about like what you've been learning over the past 2 weeks and any specific learning you want to share with us? So, Akshay and Abhijit, I guess you guys could go first about that, like in that order, I guess, like what you've been learning.
Akshay, do you want to maybe go first? Or
You can first, you can
okay,
start.
okay, cool. So for me, last 2 weeks, uh, I've been doing a bunch of things to be honest. But two major things I've been doing is just doing a lot of reading. There's a couple of design books that I'm reading. There's one that designers consider, or at least UX designers, to be ultra specific, consider to be like a classic backbone, and that's the design of everyday thing by Don Norman. And
Yeah,
then
is it
that's
is it
about the
any good?
title also.
I've been meaning to read that, but I don't know if it's any good.
It's,
Oh, it's yeah,
it's a classic.
yeah, yeah. It's exactly, yeah, it's a classic. It has a lot of actionable information. Like when I sort of first saw it, I thought, कि ठीक है, ज्ञान. There's a lot of actionable tips in there, which you can sort of once you understand, you can immediately use on your products, and that will sort of deliver higher customer retention and those kinds of metrics. But even otherwise, he goes into a very deep explanation of the psychology of the user. And one thing which he says all the time in public speaking and in the book as well is pay attention to what the users do and not what they say, because it's like that. To be a bit cliche, it's like what Henry Ford said, right? He said, if I asked people what they wanted, they'd say they wanted faster horses rather than cars. But what users really wanted was just to get from A to B faster, and cars did that better than any kind of horse on steroids.
Right, the
So
jobs to be done
yeah, that's
framework, I guess.
yup, for sure. So yeah, no, it's super handy. Apart from that, if you're currently very frustrated at the world and you're very cynical, then there's also Ruined by Design by Mike Montero, and that's more designer specific again. But that sort of goes into, if you start sort of shoehorning design into doing things it's not meant to do, or if you let the business team take over every aspect of the product rather than carefully sort of understanding the users, that can just end up long term damaging your product. So that's also another very interesting book. So, yeah, that's pretty much I've just been reading at the moment.
Okay, cool. So, Akshay, do you wanna talk about some of the things you've been learning over the past 2 weeks?
Yeah, I've been doing a couple of things. So mostly on the technical. So our company recently shifted to Fusion 360 from SolidWorks. So we've been doing some, like me along with my teammates have been trying to learn that software and see how can best fit our product and is like product workflow through Fusion 360. And related to my my side hustle, the app that I'm building, I'm learning a bit more about WebSockets and all, something that I haven't ever known about before actually. So yeah, trying to get data through WebSockets and everything. So because uh, we're trying to implement chat functionality into the app, so that's where WebSockets would come in. So
Are you
that is
using
what I have been
Socket.io?
learning for. Let's sorry.
Socket.io or something
No,
else?
this is using Django channels.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool,
Yeah,
cool.
so mostly yeah, technical. Haven't been reading a lot lately, but yeah.
Uh, Pratik, do you want to talk about what you've been doing for the past 2 weeks? If you're, I guess, yeah, you're the, cool.
Like I said, we have started building one of the product at my company, which would help
basically smart analysis of all the audio files. So apart from my daily operation, I started doing that. So nothing on personal level, but was just so much into the the job related things.
Okay, so what's the top learning from what you've been doing so far?
So there is no unique top this week, Akash. I mean, from the past 2 weeks now, it was let's say a bit of a haywire for me to learn most of the new things, get hands on the new tools, and figuring out how to start. So I think by next session I would be able to throw a lot of insights that what I have concluded for anyone to just start into building something new. What are the feasible what is the best way to kickstart something? How do you take it ahead, and so on?
Ah, okay.
Yeah, about
Madhavi, would
AR
you
and VR, I have not made any development with respect to my product that we were talking last time.
right?
Uh, yeah, so yeah, that's it.
All right. Yeah, Madhavi, do you want to talk about what you've been learning over the past 2 weeks and what major thing you can share with us, I guess?
Uh, Not anything very interesting, but yeah. So I've been researching and writing articles as a part of my personal project. So there was this 3D printed footbridge that was recently installed in Amsterdam. So I was reading and learning what they have been doing, and it was very interesting to know that they've fused a lot of ML and data science algorithms into uh, the way which it is printed. So, fusion of what computer science and mechanical engineering would be. So, that was something very interesting to know about. Yeah, that's all.
It's a lab in itself. They've put a lot of sensors to collect data about the bridge, how it wears off over time, so that future people who are going to 3D print the bridge get to learn a lot from that. I think that was a really cool aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've also tried this paramodeling algorithms, which I'm yet to actually learn about. But yeah, it was very interesting to read about it. And the sensors also. Yeah.
Yeah,
So if I understand correctly, they have 3D printed a bridge now.
they have done that before, but yeah, this one is more cool. Yeah,
So this footbridge was installed in Amsterdam, and at the same time, I think in Venice, they installed a cement. Uh, I mean, cement reinforced bridge. I mean, cement was used as the reinforcement. So two parts of the world and two different technologies.
Yeah, that's something I heard actually. That's very interesting you brought that up. I heard in Amsterdam they 3D printed the entire bridge.
yeah,
I don't know if it's the same thing you're talking about, but that
Yeah,
was
exactly. That's what I'm talking about. It was a footbridge that was
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
3D
And
printed.
I think like one of the notable things was it was 3D printed steel, and I don't know, maybe Akshay can maybe put some more light into that. But I always thought that that was something super difficult to do using the 3D printing technique.
yeah. It is kind of still a difficult thing to do. So it's a very credible thing that they were able to achieve over there at that scale. I mean, metal 3D printing has existed, but over like in smaller volumes or like at a lab level thing, and bringing it out in the open world is something that you know you. I mean, if you would expect someone to do it, it would be the Europeans. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, it sounds like it's raining cats and dogs where you are.
not really. I think it might be my AC.
Ah, okay. I guess I'll finish off with what I had been doing over the past few weeks. So last week I kind of launched what do I call it, a paid an info product or something like that about React, and then to support that, I moved my website to Ghost, which is a web publishing platform like WordPress. So it was originally built to be a much faster and more modular form of WordPress, which just solved a very few set of problems, and then they basically have a very extensible system where people can build their own integrations on top of that. So a lot of people have been building micro tools on top of that and making some profit on it. So I tried using it to host my own website, and I tried to self-host it a lot of times, but I failed. That then I realized that I could throw money at that problem and make it go away from me. So that is what I did.
Always an option.
Yeah. Yeah, so I am on the paid plan right now, but it would get very expensive as it scales up. So I'm looking at other options while I'm on the cheapest plan there. Yeah, and that's what my learning has been, I guess, that I can throw money at a problem. My second problem is how I get more money, I guess.
Ah, yes. The age, everyone, like, I'm sure everyone can relate to that.
Yeah.
Like a constant, yeah.
Sorry, constant what?
Yeah, no, that's like a constant thing everyone's sort of thinking about, right? Just in general, how to get paid better for your productivity.
Yeah, agreed. And I'm trying new things out, and hopefully, like one of those does really well, and then I guess we all become collectively rich.
Yeah, you make it super big, and then suddenly you get popular, and you're being interviewed by like Forbes and Wire and things like that. And you're like, how do you do it?
Yeah,
Uh,
I guess there's still 6 years for Forbes 30 under 30 for me, or for every one of us, I guess.
yeah, yeah, we've got time. We can do this.
Yeah. Uh,
Akash, I wanted to ask to Akshay. So, because Akshay, you said you are like a little bit, or I think maybe closely acquainted to 3D printing or 3D printers, right?
Yes, yes.
So a few years back, I went to one of the commercial exhibition in Bandra, Mumbai, and I saw so the entire half of the exhibition area was basically I don't remember the name exhibition name, but it was basically for the 3D printing. The objective of the exhibition was 3D printing, and there were a lot of 3D printers. Most of them were B2B. I'm pardoned by the way if there is noise in the background because there is heavy rain going on.
Okay.
The stalls and all these enterprises were dealing into B2B. That time I had a thought, I dropped it there only, but then I that thought was always
Krishna?
popping up in my mind that